Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for gathering here today. You've joined the webinar that presents an overview of the 2025 draft update of the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy. Today, you'll hear from a state leader who will set the stage for the 2025 update. Then Dave Wall, the lead NRS scientist, will present highlights from the draft 2025 update. Throughout the whole meeting, use your chat function to submit questions or comments, but mostly questions. We will gather those throughout this meeting today. And then next week on Thursday, we have an entire session devoted to answering questions. We'll take all the questions gathered today and get them ready for next week, as well as taking them live next week. Well, with that, I'm delighted to turn this meeting over to MPCA Assistant Commissioner Dana Vanderbosch. Dana?
Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Vanderbosch. I'm an Assistant Commissioner for Water Policy and Agriculture here at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And I wanted to start by thanking you for making the time to hear about the 2025 draft update to the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy. Our state has a very long history of working to manage nutrients in our waters. Minnesotans really care about clean and healthy water, whether it's for drinking, recreation, or protecting fish and wildlife. And that's why we're here today, to share progress, to outline where we need to go next, and to invite your involvement as we continue this important work. If you look at the next slide, you'll see the cover pages from the 3 Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy publications that we have released so far. On the left is the original 2014 Nutrient Reduction Strategy. And that strategy really set the foundation for many state initiatives that have gone forward since 2014. In the middle, we developed a progress report 5 years later. And today we're focused on the draft 2025 update to the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy. What these 3 publications really show together is how far we have come. The 2025 draft provides a significant update. For the past decade, people have sampled water, we've analyzed data, and mapped the results across Minnesota. You'll see evidence of progress, particularly in reducing phosphorus, and also recognize areas where we need to focus more effort, especially on reducing nitrogen. And while it's important to look back, we also need to focus on what is needed moving forward. So you'll see some new tools in the 2025 update that will guide our work as a state. You may be wondering, where are we going? Are we on the right track? Why is this work so important? It's important to focus on reducing nutrients because Minnesotans really value clean water. We recognize that it's our responsibility to do all we can to protect it. The vast majority of water in Minnesota does drain to the Mississippi. So reducing nutrients also matters because we care about the Mississippi River. It's a critical major river in our state, and it's also our nation's great river. We care about the Red River of the North, especially for folks joining us today from places like Moorhead and the Red River Valley. Taking care of that Red River is really essential to the state as well. Minnesotans also treasure our Great Lake, Lake Superior. It is one of the greatest lakes in the world, and protecting and maintaining this precious resource is a priority and, again, our responsibility. And I'm willing to bet that almost everyone on this call has a favorite lake or a special creek, a river, a waterfall, somewhere in Minnesota, someplace that is special to you, that it's important for us to protect and preserve. And so our state and our citizens have made it clear that protecting and restoring our water quality matters. It's important, and it's all of our responsibility. The Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy reflects that shared commitment. Why do we focus on nutrients? Because excess nutrients harm our waters and our communities. They hurt aquatic life, things like insects, snails, crayfish, mussels, trout hatchlings, important parts of our aquatic ecosystems. They also trigger algal blooms that can turn our lakes green and create unhealthy conditions for recreating. And in some cases, excess nutrients can even affect human health. Where are we finding problems from nutrients? Well, we can see high levels of these nutrients showing up in many places in Minnesota, as you'll hear about later. As I mentioned, most of our state's water eventually drains into the Mississippi River. We also see nutrient problems at the mouth of the Gulf, where excess nutrients from upstream creates a temporary dead zone every year. Some of our state's nutrients flow north from Minnesota into Canada via the Red River of the North, contributing to the algal bloom in Lake Winnipeg, as described in the box on the far right of the slide. Now, let's take a look at a map of Minnesota, and you'll see some of the pretty large goals that we're working to achieve. By intensifying our efforts, we can meet Minnesota's water quality goals, create healthy communities for us all, and help improve waters for our neighbors to the north and to the south. This is a big project, and it's taken a big team to get there. More than 50 people served on work groups focused on specific parts of this project. Another 50 agency leaders, staff, contractors, and researchers worked behind the scenes, analyzing data, creating maps, and building tracking tools. Partners from 10 different organizations have been working collaboratively to tackle this work for the past 2 years, and really even longer, as many of these folks really helped us create the 2014 Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy. And on the next slide, you'll see a series of columns that list topics that the work groups addressed. It's really an amazing body of work here. It's really astonishing. And the 2025 Nutrient Reduction Strategy brings forward information related to every one of these topical areas. The point is that this updated strategy is a state-of-the-art project that tells us how far we have come and shows we now have the tools and the insights to reach our goals. At this 10-year milestone, it's clear that working together across the state with everyone doing their part really makes a real impact. In Minnesota, we are working together to solve the common problem of excess nitrogen and phosphorus. There are a lot of people in our state, from volunteer water monitors, people who serve on local water planning boards, as well as private landowners and professionals who together have made a positive impact that you see today. And progress has been made based on a foundation of partnerships, collaboration, and science. And on behalf of the state of Minnesota, I extend our gratitude to everyone involved, to those folks listed on the screen, to all of you here today, and for other people that you will encourage to get involved and contribute to this project while we place this draft strategy on public comment, open for public comment. We thank you. Reducing nutrients in water is critical for restoring a balance, for reversing negative trends that we are seeing in some areas of the state, and also for protecting our health and that of our aquatic ecosystems. And as you listen to our next speaker, Dave Wall, you will get an overview of the draft update and learn about some of the key findings. The 2025 Nutrient Reduction Strategy really shows us that when we work together, we can really accomplish big tasks. So while there's a lot of work that we still need to do, we have the tools and we can accomplish the remaining work together. Thank you again for making the time to be with us this afternoon. And at this time, I'd like to hand the presentation off to Dave.
Thank you, Dana. My name is Dave Wall. I'm a scientist who's been working on nutrients for really most of my career. Spent about 16 years working in the feedlot manure management, manure application program, and about 22 years in the broader context of the watershed and statewide picture. I want to echo Dana's thanks to so many people who have contributed to this effort. And I do want to also have a special thanks and shout out to the co-writers of the chapters of the Nutrient Reduction Strategy. I want to thank Matt Drewitz, Corey Layfield, Marco Graziani, colleagues. We have Reed Christensen from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Julie Westerland from the Board of Water and Soil Resources, and really the list goes on and on. So I'll stop there, but bring up a few other people as we go along. So many people working on this, and this is, yeah, a big day to all get together. Thank you for being here. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon. And what we're going to cover here in the next hour or so is 5 major topics or themes. First, this is a big day, and we'll talk about why. And we'll get on to our most pressing needs as we talk about nutrients. And number three, what will it take to achieve the final goals? Talk about the practices and programs that are going to be important here moving forward. Number four, show you some helpful, cool new maps and tools. And five, really stress your input on this draft document and how we'll get to Corey Layfield at the end, who will comment on how you can provide comments to this draft. So let's start with the first topic. This is a big day. So we have released the draft of the updated nutrient reduction strategy. This is our most comprehensive ever scientific analysis of water nutrients and set of next steps to achieve our nutrient goals. We're building from the 2014 nutrient reduction strategy, but really taking it to a whole new level. So here we are, the big day, 10 years in a 25 or more year journey. We are right in between the blue and the yellow. And as we think about how to improve our implementation of the nutrient reduction strategy over the next 15 years, we're going to pause here and take a look at where we're at today. And this is really a time to celebrate our successes, celebrate program work, BMP adoption, best management practices, that is, new tools, improved waters, and more. But it's also a big day because it's a time to intensify our efforts. Let's start with the things to celebrate. We have seen successes at every step along the way of our nutrient reduction strategy. Kind of this is the way it works diagram. On the left, we see state level support through government and private sector. And that state level support feeds into local watershed work as well as practice adoption on the land. So as you move from left to right, we go from the state level support to the local watershed work to the rural and urban practice adoption. Then the practices lead to improved local waters, which help with our own the issues that Dana talked about, algae, drinking water, biological health, et cetera. And then we have cascading benefits all the way downstream to the Gulf of Mexico to the south and Lake Winnipeg to the north and the Great Lakes to the east. So let's talk about some successes on each of those five columns that I just showed you. Starting with state level support, working together, Minnesota has launched or strengthened in the past 10 to 15 years, 25 voluntary programs, 10 regulatory programs, 30 best management practices have been advanced, 10 new online tools, and more than 40 new river load monitoring sites have been added. So a number of advances at the state level to support our nutrient reduction work. So we move to the next column over the local watershed work. We now have in place a local watershed delivery system that is really the envy of the nation. It's firmly established across Minnesota. It includes watershed nutrient priorities and targets, and so we know that. We have watershed plans in place to reduce nutrients really throughout most every watershed in the state, and people's priorities are better understood. This is ultimately about people, and understanding the human dimension and people's priorities is extremely important for this work. Moving over then further to the right, we end up with rural and urban practice adoption. And I'll just highlight a couple of successes here with practices. So our wastewater phosphorus has been reduced 76% across the state. Dramatic reductions in the phosphorus coming out of our urban wastewater. When we look at cropland and agricultural practices, we've been tracking that. We have new tracking systems for that, particularly from the government programs. And from the government programs alone since 2014, we have added over 4 million acres of practices. As we move further again to the right and improve and look at our improvements in local waters, the local level, we are seeing a lot more improvements than worsening conditions. Particularly evident is phosphorus in our rivers and streams, where the down blue arrows there indicate we have decreasing trends, and the circles would mean no trend detected. So a lot more decreases with still some no trend detected, particularly up in the northwest. As we look at nitrate, we see a mixed picture. We do see some decreases in the south central part of the state, but concentrations are still very high there. We do see increases in other areas and no trend in really the most sites. But with nitrate, as we look in-state and our in-state waters, there have been some signs of us turning the corner with nitrate. I've been working on the nitrate issue really since 1987, and this is really starting to see some evidence of some indications anyway of some good news of turning the corner with nitrate in our streams to some degree. We've looked also at our upper aquifers and looking at the groundwater, and we see a lot more improvement than worsening. Still with a lot of wells though with no trend. And in our major rivers, we'll talk about in a minute, we're starting to see some indications of decreases. So a lot more work to do on nitrate. We need to finish the job with phosphorus, but our in-state waters have been showing some good signs of improvement. So we go looking on the major rivers on down toward the Gulf. We have a 32% phosphorus reduction that we're detecting in Red Wing. That's our longest term monitoring site. The Metropolitan Council has been monitoring that site way back to our baseline period, our baseline that we're comparing against on the Mississippi River and our Gulf Hypoxia Task Force is 1980 to 1996. So big reduction since that baseline period. Winona, the MPCA monitors, seeing decreases, and La Crosse, the USGS is monitored and also seeing decreases with phosphorus. Now on the nitrogen side of things, we have slight indications of nitrogen reduction since the baseline. And there have been some indications that since about 2014, the improvements are a bit more pronounced, but really still a mixed results with the nitrogen. Now, if we go all the way down to the Gulf, we'll see the hypoxic zone. Every year, this zone of low oxygen arises south of Louisiana. This is a zone where there's low enough oxygen that the fish and shellfish need to move out. They can't survive there. So the size of this hypoxic zone has been monitored over time. You can see those blue bars going up and down. They go up depending on how much nutrients are flowing down the Gulf. And also with storms in the Gulf, a lot of things that can influence the size of that hypoxic zone. The goal is to get the size of the hypoxic zone down to that yellow bar across the bottom. If we look at the 5-year rolling average, we do see a decrease since about 2011. So continued monitoring with that by NOAA and the USGS. The USGS has found that total nitrogen loads have decreased by more than 20% going into the Gulf since the baseline period. So that's another encouraging note there. So as we look at our state programs, our watershed work, our practice changes, our in-state improvements, our Mississippi River phosphorus, we want to just take a moment to recognize that the accomplishments that you all have made working together across Minnesota is quite remarkable. I've just covered some of them. There's more in the document. But right now, yeah, cheers to your committed work and accomplishments. So now, though, we need to to pivot and look at the empty half of the glass. We've been looking at the full half of the glass there. Many of you like to look at the glass half full. Others of us looking at the glass half empty and the work that we still have to do. So just like these people running the marathon in Duluth, we have some huge challenges ahead of us. It's a marathon. It's a long endurance run to our goals. It's not a sprint, but we've been on this race for a long time, but we need to continue. So let's switch now to our second topic of today, our most pressing needs as it relates to nutrients in water. So before I go any further, though, I just want to take a moment to explain some things that could be a bit confusing, and it relates to sometimes you hear the term total nitrogen, sometimes you hear the term nitrate. So if you look at that column on the left, when we look at impacted waters in the state with nutrients, particularly nitrogen, we see that there's different forms of nitrogen that make up total nitrogen. The organic nitrogen in blue at the top, ammonium, ammonia, nitrate, the big part of this bar in orange, and nitrite. So nitrate is in our more polluted waters the biggest part of the total nitrogen. So the point being, when we're addressing nitrate in our own waters in the state, it also then is decreasing the total nitrogen substantially. We can work at both together. So if we look at nitrate for our in-state waters, it's a nitrate concentration goals and standards for our in-state waters, both for drinking water, for aquatic life. So that's the focus. But as we make reductions in nitrate, we will then also be working towards our total nitrogen load reductions. And we have goals that have been talked about here by Dana for Lake Winnipeg, the Great Lakes, the Gulf, and those relate to total nitrogen. So let's start with our in-state nutrients and take a look at some of the things going on in Minnesota that we're addressing. We have nitrate concentration goals to address drinking water, and we're working on the specific goals for stream aquatic life. The science has been coming together. It's been building here over the past 15 years on what levels of nitrogen are safe for aquatic life. And so over the next few years, we are moving forward with developing standards that will protect the stream aquatic life. Our criteria, our draft criteria right now would suggest about 8 milligrams per liter for much of the state. And you see the red and the orange areas and the yellow watersheds down to the south part of the state. That's where we have elevated nitrate in our streams, high enough to where it could potentially be affecting aquatic life. That means the food chain for fish. As we look at the map then on the right, the drinking water wells, you'll see that it's a different geographic coverage where we see the red and the orange and the yellow. Some of it overlaps, like southwestern Minnesota, southeastern Minnesota. Central Minnesota comes in here though with all the sandy soils where we have high nitrate and drinking water wells. So those we're looking at that, but we're also looking at the phosphorus concentrations in state. And the map on lake restoration and protection shows watersheds where we have either a fair number of lakes that are impaired or we need protection. There's a lot of lakes that are very sensitive to phosphorus additions where small increases or decreases can make a big difference. So really both are represented on that map. For river eutrophication and oxygen, which affects oxygen levels in our rivers, and phosphorus being the big driver there, southern Minnesota really stands out on many watersheds there with high phosphorus. So let's switch now to our downstream goals, and then we'll come to comparing the two. So our total nitrogen load reductions, our best estimates of what we still need are 39% reduction for the Mississippi River and a 42% reduction in the Red River of the North. And that's a shared responsibility in the Red River with the Dakotas. As we look at total phosphorus load reduction still needed, we've made a lot of progress with phosphorus, so we're about 13% remaining. But with the Red River, we have not made progress, and 57% is our best estimate of what's remaining there for load reductions on phosphorus. So back to the Mississippi, looking at this a little bit differently with this schematic, we can, from on the left, a 1980 to 96 baseline, we weren't making progress. We weren't able to detect a lot of progress over the years, and we're still having a hard time detecting a lot of progress. But our best indications, when we put all the data together and look at it, is perhaps a 6% reduction in nitrogen on our way to that 45% reduction. So a long ways to go. Cropland being the biggest source contributor to that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So here's that 39% reduction still needed, 45% minus the 6%. So how do the in-state needs compare to the downstream needs for nitrogen? If we look at the reductions that we need in these highlighted areas, the red, orange, yellow, bright areas on the left, stream aquatic life, to get that draft criteria that we're looking at, around a 32% reduction on average. Drinking water wells with our high nitrate wells, to get it down to the drinking water standard, a 38% reduction on average. So compare that to the 39% we need at the Gulf, for our Mississippi River nitrogen load reduction needs. It's in the same ballpark. And so in other words, if we're making progress addressing our in-state needs for nitrogen and nitrate, that will go a long ways toward reaching our goals and our commitment for the Mississippi River on down to the Gulf. That's nitrate and nitrogen. Now let's look at phosphorus. So phosphorus, we started pretty high in 1980, 96. Through the results of urban and cropland, we've documented both, progress with both, but particularly urban wastewater. We've been able to reduce that by about 32% on our way to the 45%. So we have that 13% that's still needed. Now, how does that relate to what we need to do in Minnesota for our own waters in the state? For lake eutrophication and protection, where we have impaired lakes, we need about 42% average reduction still. And some of that's internal loading, but a lot of it coming from the watershed too, flowing into the lakes. We also need about the same amount of reduction for our rivers where we have impaired rivers. So it's a smaller part of the Mississippi River Basin, but where we need reductions, they're pretty large. So again, if we're addressing our in-state needs in the Mississippi River Basin, we'll be achieving, close to achieving or achieving, likely achieving our 13% reduction that's still needed for the Mississippi River. Now, the two work together. It's not just one or the other, the Mississippi River, our own in-state. We focus on many of our in-state needs for the Mississippi River Basin, and it helps downstream, it helps us in-state, the waters that we love, and yeah, so a win-win. But it's a different story for Lake Winnipeg and the Red River to the north. Now the Red River and going on up to Lake Winnipeg, the total amount of nutrients is much lower than the Mississippi. The Mississippi represents about 80% of our nutrients leaving the state. And Lake Superior about 4%, so that leaves the remainder for the Red River. But what is leaving, we still need a pretty big reduction as far as a percentage, 57%, as shown on the right. The Dakota's adding about 2/3 of our total phosphorus load. So here we're looking at phosphorus, and what we see, though, if you look to the northwest where most of the phosphorus is leaving, going in the Red River on up to Lake Winnipeg, in those areas, we don't have as many high priority watersheds because of local impairments. And so we can't just rely on what addressing our own in-state needs and have that take care of Lake Winnipeg. Like I talked about with the Mississippi, we need to be focused on also our downstream neighbor in Manitoba and Lake Winnipeg as we address this, along with the Dakotas. Again, the shared responsibility with the Dakotas. How about nitrogen in Lake Winnipeg? Same situation. We need a pretty big reduction. We've made a little progress on that, but the Dakotas add about 3/5 of our total nitrogen load, and we're about 2/5. But if we look at where our stream aquatic life may be affected by high nitrate and our drinking water wells, we don't see as many priority watersheds up that way. So again, we need to be looking at our downstream neighbors when we're thinking about the Red River Basin. How about Lake Superior? We've got a goal of no phosphorus increase in the long run. So keeping phosphorus the same or lowering it, ideally lowering it. And so for nitrogen, we've added for the 2025 nutrient reduction strategy an interim goal of also no net increase for nitrogen, because we're seeing some indications that near shore waters where high nitrate comes in, nitrate can be affecting Lake Superior, especially as the water's warm. We've seen a warming increase in Lake Superior. So until we learn more about the effects of nitrate in Lake Superior, we're saying no net increase and ideally lower nitrogen inputs into the lake. On an encouraging note, the USGS, who's done a lot of monitoring in the state as well, they looked at the St. Louis River, the biggest tributary going into Lake Superior from Minnesota. And from 2011 to 2023, they found that there are improvements in both nitrogen and phosphorus, decreasing trends. So that's encouraging to see. So our most pressing needs summary for phosphorus, addressing our in-state lake and river eutrophication. And most of the high priority watersheds are in the Mississippi River Basin for that, but really be everywhere. Protecting lakes sensitive to phosphorus additions, and managing our own Minnesota contributions to the Red River and Lake Winnipeg. For total nitrogen and nitrate, reduce drinking water nitrate. And this is particularly in areas where you have vulnerable aquifers, geologically vulnerable aquifers, sandy soils, fractured bedrock, shallow soils below row crops. Reducing nitrate into rivers from is also important for both our in-state aquatic life health as well as downstream waters. Tile drainage below row crops is an important pathway for nitrate getting into our rivers. But urban wastewater discharges as well, and we need to be looking at both to reduce the nitrate to levels that are good for our own state and for downstream. All right, take a deep breath. So we've looked at the glass half full, and we've looked at the empty part, our needs, our big needs. And now let's take a look at what is it going to take to achieve the final goals. It's going to take addressing multiple nutrient sources. We've looked at the sources for the original nutrient reduction strategy. We've reevaluated them for this update, and the two compare pretty closely, particularly in the Lake Winnipeg drainage and the Mississippi River drainage. We see that there are many important sources here, and because the goals are so big, we really do need to be looking at multiple sources. The agriculture represents the biggest slice of the pie. It's also biggest land use in the state, and many of the crops we grow are a bit leaky in terms of allowing nutrients to leave the cropland. So agriculture is going to be very important for success, but our urban areas are as well, and wastewater, stormwater runoff for phosphorus in particular. The other category represents stream bank erosion, among other things. And that's also going to be very important for our phosphorus goals, is addressing stream bank erosion. So that I should highlight here on these pie graphs that this is statewide. The sources really vary a lot, depend from watershed to watershed, from basin to basin. And so this really oversimplifies it. And that's why the watershed approach that we work on is so important, because each watershed can look at what's going on within their own watershed and what are the biggest sources. Okay, so I've shown you this diagram below. This is the Mississippi River near our Iowa state border, the nitrogen loads. And the question being then, how can we, we've struggled to get down to maybe 6% reduction. How are we going to get down to a 45% reduction? What can achieve that? Well, let's start with the agricultural practices. The University of Minnesota has really been working hard over the past couple of years to take a look at all the body of research on agricultural practices and how much they reduce nutrients to waters. Dr. Carl Rosen, Dr. Laura Christensen, and Dr. Emerson Souza has been extremely valuable. They've evaluated all types of practices really for nitrogen, and right now have evaluated the most impactful practices for phosphorus, but they still will be finishing the job over the year here on phosphorus practices. But for the nitrogen practices, we look at fertilizer and manure management. And where we can make reductions of 10, 25% rates or improve the timing of application or the forms, we can get a 5 to 20% reduction. It's not going to solve the problem. It's going to be a part of the solution where we can make those reductions and improvements in practices. But it's going to take other practices such as cover crops, relay crops, following short season crops in Minnesota like corn silage, but also on our main row crops. So that's going to be important. That can get 18 to 35% where we can put those in. Important part of the solution. Cropping systems changes by putting more perennials in our rotations, small grains in rotations, and other ways of adding perennials. But that's where we can do that and do that feasibly. We can make big reductions in nitrogen into our waters. So that's important, but it can't be done everywhere. And another important one, we have a large fraction of our croplands that are tile drained. And there's a number of practices that have been researched over the past decade and beyond. And they can reduce nitrogen often in that 30 to 50% range where we're putting those in, where we're able to put those on the fields. So there's no one practice, there's no one set of practices that's going to get to those goals I outlined earlier. It's going to take, really all of these types of practices together in different places, not necessarily on the same field always, but sometimes on the same field, sometimes on different fields. But it's going to take a variety of the subtitle of the University of Minnesota with Laura Christensen's work there was calling all practices. So meaning we do need to not just rely on one. Often we term it the silver bullet. Well, yeah, we need the silver buckshot. We need all the practices that we can to reach the goals. But wastewater nitrogen is another. I've emphasized that already. Is an important part of what we're needing to do for our nitrogen in waters. So we've made that big decrease in phosphorus, 76% reduction from wastewater. But for nitrogen, our monitoring's increased a lot, and we've been tracking this better and better since 2014. But we're not really seeing decreases in the wastewater nitrogen discharges as that monitoring has improved. It's about 8% of the load across the state. to our waters. So while, yeah, it's a much smaller than cropland, let's say, but it is an important part. And we have a wastewater nitrogen reduction strategy at the MPCA since 2024 with phased implementation, which details the steps to take to move toward wastewater nitrogen discharge reductions. Oh, and you'll see often as we go, maybe you've noticed already on like the lower right, you'll see the chapters where we can find more information about these topics. And here it's chapter 4. Anyway, take a look at that as we go along here too. And then you can know which chapters to go into as you're looking further at specific topics. Okay, the nitrogen reduction scenario, I've shown you this in different ways, but show you one more way here. The baseline on the left, then we've dropped it a little bit, maybe pretty much still the same with that goal much lower on the right. So here's the reduction needed to get to the goal for the Mississippi River. And as I mentioned earlier, what we do for the Mississippi River and our own state needs work together very well. But about 78 million pounds per year on average reduction. And, it looks like a little green box, but that little green box represents a huge magnitude of change. So what does it represent? What would we need to do to get that little green box and get down to our goal? We have categories of practice types on the left of this table. The acres added in millions, that's the capital M, millions of acres in the middle. And the total nitrogen load reduction that would be estimated or modeled to result at the state line if we add those practices. So we can show a scenario. We look at this a couple different ways and with different models. We can show different scenarios. They're generally similar in terms of what it's going to take. Big change. There's the three top ones in this scenario, and really the other scenarios we've run too, are number one, the continuous living cover. Having the longer duration of living cover on the land throughout the year in the spring and fall months and living roots in the ground. The second would be the tile water storage and treatment practices. And the third would be the urban wastewater nitrogen. So those are key practices, but we really need the whole combination because the amount is so high. Oh, yeah, so let's leave it at that. With phosphorus, the good news is that if that scenario I just showed you, we adopt that, that also is enough to get to our phosphorus load goals. So we focus on that strategy for nitrogen, but what that also includes overland runoff. It includes some reduced tillage, includes some other things that we will meet our phosphorus load goals at the state line, the Iowa state line for the Mississippi River. We have similar scenarios for the Red River. Not enough time to really get into that today, but just to mention that's in the chapter 5 of the strategy. But I've been talking about what it'll take in terms of practices. Now let's talk about what it'll take in terms of state level support. So in general, Minnesota has so many strong foundations. We talked about some of those earlier, these foundations to build on. Not like we're starting from scratch. We have tremendous foundational work that we can build on. And so let me talk about 5 different areas of state level support that the team working on this and agreed would be very important for us to achieve our goals. We have this strong foundation of the watershed work that I've talked about. And to really use that very impressive framework of delivery of best management practices. And to do that on a broader scale, on a bigger, more landscape scales, we identify some things in the strategy that some initiatives that would really help move us to bigger scales of adoption through our watershed work. And those are shown here in these navy blue boxes or rectangles. It's going to require streamlining. It's going to require learning from what's proven successful and replicating that and helping watersheds with that. Improving tools that will help us at the local level, workforce capacity, the private industry and the partnerships with private industry are going to be critical again, and the research to improve the practices. The research, I do want to emphasize that because I think a lot of people think we've done research on so much, don't we have all the answers? And really, as the university looked at this, as I've looked at this, and others have looked at this, it's really no. We know a lot. We know enough to move forward. We know a lot about these practices, but there's still much we need to learn to really be able to do it more economically, more feasibly, more reliably. So research needs to continue and we need to support that as well. So we need state level support for the continuous living cover. I noted earlier that is where we have the biggest potential for reductions in nitrogen moving to our waters. We've got this good foundations in Minnesota with Forever Green, our soil health programs. And so planting these cover crops, perennial crops, small grains, pasture, et cetera, is going to be critical over time. And there's a recommendation in the 2025 nutrient reduction strategy to convene a task force that will identify how to achieve the next 1 million acres of continuous living cover, but also to look beyond that and how can we get up to millions, plural, of acres of continuous living cover. And we also are planning to develop a tracking system using satellite imagery and other information to show progress over time with continuous living cover. We have these foundations of certification programs. Our Minnesota Department of Ag and many others and private industry have been working on our Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. Over 1.2 million acres are involved with this right now, have been certified. So we're recommending to keep increasing to get to multiple millions, to add an endorsement for nitrogen, to really focus on nitrogen and the best practices for nitrogen. So that's going to be important, but I also want to recognize that there are other certification programs out there. The Minnesota Crop Production Retailers has a 4R nutrient stewardship certification and dealing with fertilizer application and managing of the nutrients in the field. And that began in 2020, relatively new, but other certification programs can help us as well. What it will take: support of Minnesota's laws, rules, and permits. And we have a number of laws, rules, and permits and regulatory requirements that have strengthened or been initiated or strengthened or both in the past decade. Our manure application permits, for example, and the rules are just being opened up now, or to take a look at their feedlot rules. We got fertilizer restrictions that have come into place since 2014. Our groundwater protection rule, our urban stormwater regulatory program has advanced, along with septic systems and urban wastewater. So there's the list goes on. Many things have been added, strengthened, and initiated in the past 10 to 15 years, and we need to continue that support of these programs, staffing, program development, and oversight. What will it take? Statewide investment for multiple benefits. Let me talk about this a little bit. The practice costs very greatly. There's many that are, and some, not many are profitable, particularly you're looking at the specific ones related to infield nutrient management. But many are not profitable, many are costly. So achieving the final goals does require large investments. We added it up, and what it appears to be over $1 billion per year for the practices themselves on an annualized basis. So that's a big investment. And so we have recommended in the new 2025 nutrient reduction strategy to take a more in-depth look at the economics and funding options for getting the levels of adoption that I was talking about earlier. One of the things that will help is if we don't just look at practices to achieve nitrate reduction or phosphorus reduction, what we use, we really emphasize practices that will achieve multiple benefits. Benefits for combination of agriculture, for water, nutrients, and sediment, soil health, wildlife, flooding, climate, pollinators, etc. And to really research, develop, and use those practices that will address several needs together. This will help justify the costs of these practices if we are looking at and emphasizing the multiple benefits we can achieve with some, if not many, of the practices. So just a little diagram to kind of make that point that we have different types of practices for climate action, for resilient landscapes and reduced emissions and stored carbon. We have different practices for resilient agriculture, soil health and living cover and water storage and fertilizer efficiencies. And we have for nutrient reduction, can achieve lake and stream benefits, groundwater nitrate, and downstream benefits. So where these overlap, where you have practices that you can meet all three, that's really ideal to get the multiple benefit practices. And so there's information about that in Chapter 5 in our nutrient reduction strategy, the more details. So I just want to remind you, take a moment here to pause and before we move on to the next section and just say to put your questions in the chat. We are keeping a document of those questions and we'll return to them next week. So please, as we go along, just keep putting your questions in the chat. All right. Hopefully take a deep breath. It's been a while here. We've been at this and talked about a lot, why this is a big day, our most pressing needs, what it's going to take to achieve the goals. And now I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some helpful new maps and tools in their 2025 nutrient reduction strategy. Sometimes I get the question, well, what's new? What's new with this nutrient reduction strategy compared to the old one and other states and all? And I do want to emphasize that we didn't just go in and change some numbers and update some words and some numbers here and there. This really is a whole reconstruction of the nutrient reduction strategy, looking at what we have learned over the past decade, which is a tremendous amount, and looking what the needs are demanding. And so it's really a rewritten, revised nutrient reduction strategy, not just a tweaked one. We also, at the same time, all along, we've been developing tools and information to help us better understand and to display what's going on here with nutrients in our state's waters. This really is a continuous improving effort. Our science, our tracking, our tools, our solutions. This is ongoing nutrient reduction strategy development, adaptation, and improvement. We have a report, we have a big day, yeah, but it's really meant, and even more and more so over time, we're trying to develop this as more of an interactive tracking system, displays and dashboards. We're moving in that direction. And if you saw the webinar, Matt Drewitz and others led you through in March, that really focused on some of these. But I want to show you just a few of the tracking tools that we have and what's new with the nutrient reduction strategy. many more in the documents themselves. So we've got priority watershed maps that are new. We've updated our priority watershed maps for our downstream needs, looking at what watersheds contribute the most to our state lines to the south of the Mississippi River, to the north with the red. And so on the left, you'll see those in blue is phosphorus, in green is nitrogen. We also have totally new priority watershed maps statewide, looking at those in-state needs that I discussed at length earlier. For phosphorus, for nitrogen, and looking at, we have maps for priority areas for aquatic life, toxicity for drinking water. We have maps for lakes and lake protection. We have maps for river eutrophication. And we have overlay maps that overlay multiple needs together, which is what you see here. So chapter 3 in particular shows that. Big shout out to DNR, who helped us with those mapping efforts, and Kristen Carlson. We also then, once we have priority watersheds, we also have now planning targets for each watershed and what they could achieve from their anthropogenic sources, their human sources of nutrients, to do their part for the downstream waters, whether it be to the north in the red, or Lake Superior, or to the south in the Mississippi. So we have total nitrogen load reduction planning targets in the green map on the left and phosphorus on the right. We also have a document that explains this, and that's all as an appendix or a support document for the nutrient reduction strategy. So each watershed would know more specifically, hey, if I want to do my part to reduce nitrogen or phosphorus for our downstream neighbors, here's the amount that we need to do so that collectively, in combination, we can achieve our goals. But once you know what you're aiming for, how do you get it done? What are the combinations of practices? Well, we have a new tool for that too. It's this BMP effects estimator tool with an acronym BEAT. It's a quick, simple tool that can be used at a very small scale, sub-watershed scale, all the way up to the very large river basin scales. This tool uses our best modeling and brings together all the best modeling we've done in the state, which is also founded on our monitoring. So it's our monitoring, our modeling information, brings it all together. It then brings in the University of Minnesota research on those best management practices that I was talking about earlier. And then we can estimate what the practices can achieve for us in different combinations and at different adoption levels. We can plan ahead and plan for what we need in the future. We can also track the past work and what's been done in the past, how much progress have we made from past practices. Those tools on our website. It's also discussed in chapters 2 and 7 of the 25 nutrient reduction strategy. Also, this was just completed here this spring by the Agricultural Research Service, for the nutrient reduction strategy in Minnesota, a very in-depth analysis of comparing what's going on our cropland fields with what gets removed or what's needed for crops. So we can look and see where is there potential for surplus just based on the combined manure and fertilizers going onto fields, comparing that with university recommendations for nitrogen or for crop removal for phosphorus. So on the left, you'll see the nitrogen potential surplus, more so in the south, per watershed acre, but we also show it per cropland acre in maps in the nutrient reduction strategy. And phosphorus on the right, where we see a higher potential there in central Minnesota, where we have a lot of poultry, we also have dairy. So some potential for buildup of phosphorus in those areas. So this is new to help us look where can we think about prioritizing, and also what's the potential room for improvement. And this work is really discussed in chapter 5 and helps us understand, along with surveys and other sources of information, how much potential room for there is there for improvement in the bigger picture with fertilizer manure management. I mentioned earlier, talked about this. This is the science assessment for cropland there, in this case, nitrogen practices, and we have also phosphorus practices, the priority ones completed and the rest coming soon. And yeah, this is really an amazing piece of work. I don't want to understate this. About 170 pages of analysis looking at their practices and what they're achieving and what the range is. There's often a big range in what we're seeing in the research from the practices. And so all that is described in great detail in support document 5.1 and summarized in chapter 5. Those were some of our helpful new maps and tools and what's available. Encourage you to look at the rest of the document. You'll see much more. So, all right, here we are. We've talked about a lot. The documents are quite extensive. I'll forewarn you if you haven't been into them yet. And we're seeking your input. We need your input. We're firm believers in the collective wisdom and how we can take all the science that we put together and the document, but then also your input. We've been meeting with the stakeholders and giving presentations and had webinars and doing different things to reach out. I know Department of Agriculture has reached out to their stakeholders. We've had MPCA wastewater reaching out to stakeholders there. We've a lot of stakeholder outreach over the last couple of years, but this is really a time where we've got the document now for you to look at. You can see more specifically what it is we're showing, finding, recommending. So your input's really important at this juncture. And Corey is going to talk in a little bit about how you can provide that input. So what we're looking at, how can we improve it? What's missing? What are some better or different ways that you see to address nutrients? What are some gaps with the science that you're seeing? Where are the further needs with science? And other information and tools. What do you need to assess progress in the future? What would you like to see? Chapter 7 is loaded with ways that we are currently tracking progress and ways we intend to. So if you, that's a real important one to look at as you're looking at your thoughts on how we can do a better job of assessing progress in the future. I would recommend that you first start with the big picture. Rather than reading it from beginning to end, start with the big picture. You get the big picture in view, executive summary, which is written at the very end of our process here. Chapter 1 is the first decade of the nutrient reduction strategy and what's changed and why did we revise it? And what was this process we used to revise it? In the big picture also, we put in the front page or two of each chapter key findings. So go to those key messages, those key findings in bullet fashion in the front of each chapters 2 to 7. And chapter 8, that kind of brings together the roadmap, if you will, our recommendations for achieving the goals and summarizes that from the chapters. So take a look at that. So these are ways you can get the big picture. Then dive into the chapters, particularly chapters 2 to 7 have different topics within each chapter. And you can see the list on the left for each chapter and what, in general, what it's talking about. There's quite a bit within each chapter to dive into. And I also want to emphasize here, thirdly, to explore the depths of this work. There's an amazing amount of work that's been put together by so many different people and organizations and experts, from the University of Minnesota to our consultant Tetra Tech, Agricultural Research Service, Met Council, DNR, and Department of Agriculture, Board of Water and Soil Resources, and others. There's 20 support documents. And these are really gems. I mean, these are resources that we can use well into the future. I know we can't sit down and read them all in a night or even a week, but they are resources that we need to be using into the future. Comments are welcome also on the support documents. So take a look at those. Some of you may find some of these support documents to be as valuable or more valuable than the strategy itself because they're so rich with information. So yeah, again, don't ignore those. And just, yeah, showing two covers of a couple of the support documents. One on the right, DNR put together a very impressive piece of work on nutrient reduction strategies for stream and gully systems. For us, we summarize it in chapter 5, our chapter on rural nutrients, but it's an important source, particularly for phosphorus and sediment for that, that matter too. So how can we reduce our stream bank erosion? So in a minute, Corey Layfield will explain how to provide comments on the draft nutrient reduction strategy here. But first, I want to make a few personal concluding remarks. I've been at this a while. Mentioned earlier, about 38 years. And I'm really heartened by how much Minnesotans across the state care about their water resources. I'm also heartened by how many people have been running this marathon with me. So many people here on this meeting. So many people who helped with the original nutrient reduction strategy. And I think of Wayne Anderson, just a tremendous role and colleague to work with. And this 2025 update, so many people involved because they care deeply. The progress reported by me earlier in this presentation is because so many farmers, so many city workers, so many landowners, so many Minnesotans have been implementing changes to improve water quality. But I do stress that this is a marathon. And in my nearly 40 years of running it, I've seen tremendous progress. Seen it in our manure management and the way the nutrient sources are better managed with feedlots and manure, with urban wastewater, with fertilizers. We're not there yet. A lot of progress. Urban stormwater, septic systems, all better managed. And we've seen water quality improvements. But the marathon's far from over. I mean, we still have a ways to go. And boy, it is an endurance deal. Look at, nitrogen, I've emphasized that with nitrate and just starting to turn the corner on that, which is encouraging, but at the same time, a long ways to go. So fairly soon, I'll be passing the nutrient reduction strategy lead scientist baton to others. And as I retire, I know I'm leaving this work in great hands. And I know that Minnesota has a wealth of resources to help us finish the race. With the new 2025 nutrient reduction strategy, we are positioned well. It will improve with your input. We definitely need to keep continuing to learn, to improve, to adapt, and keep running. And we need each other. This is a team deal. Boy, we're running together, and only by running together will we all get to the finish line. So thank you for tuning in today and for listening to this overview. I look forward in about 10 days from now to sit on a panel with people from several of our nutrient reduction strategy agencies and address specific questions that you have. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Corey Layfield, who will talk about next steps.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Corey Layfield, and I'm the Nutrient Reduction Strategy Coordinator here at MPCA. I'm going to explain the how-tos for how to view the NRS, how to submit comments, and how to submit questions. for the July 24th question answer webinar. And also I'm the one who's been chatting to you. If you have put a question in the chat, that's me. So you have a face to go with the mysterious bot answering your questions. You can access the nutrient reduction strategy and supporting documents on the MPA's website, or you can use this QR code to go directly to the comments page. If you go through the website, there is a link to the review and comments. If you forget the link that we provided, you can just Google the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy and it will come right up. We just re-optimized the webpage to do that. And you can follow the links to the NRS comments page. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. The introduction page of the comments looks like this screen grab on the comment form on this slide. You can access the draft NRS related documents here. And this is probably when I should warn you that these are very large documents and they may take a while to download. You can read all 8 chapters and the executive summary listed under the very first document. We would, as Dave said, we recommend reviewing the executive summary in chapter 8 for the big picture. Or if you want to read all of them, everything is contained in the NRS draft file, which is the first in the list. And there are active links in the table of contents, so you can navigate directly to the section you wish. I just tested it out. It seems to be functioning just fine, so you do not have to scroll through all 329 pages if you don't want to. Can you go to the next slide, please? Once you have reviewed all the NRS material, you can return to the comment page. It will look like this. You will have to fill out your name and contact information before you can submit your comment. In your comments, we do ask that you please include what's your interest in the Minnesota NRS document, the action you wish the NRS team to take, including specific references to the section of the draft report you believe should be changed. We will give you bonus points for including the section or page numbers. Again, it is a very big document, so the more you help us out, the better we'll be able to target your suggestions. And then we also ask for the reasons that support your position with enough specificity that the NRS team can check out what you're suggesting and see how we can incorporate that. Make sure you hit the submit button. The online web-based public comments page is the best way to submit comments, and they are due by August 28th. This is a 45-day public comment period. It started yesterday. Next slide, please. If you do not wish to submit comments through the public comment page, you can send a letter using the following address. Please address it attention to me as Corey Layfield, and we will know it is an NRS related comment. I also wanted to mention that comments and questions in the chat today don't count as official comments, so please feel free to copy and paste what you shared in the comments in the comment form. We will review and respond to comments during September and October. And throughout the fall, we will work to make sure we incorporate your input into the NRS, and we'll publish the final non-draft form of the NRS by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. All right, if you have a question about today's webinar or generally about the Minnesota NRS, we are holding another event on July 24th to get those questions answered. As I'm sure you noticed by today's presentation, we had so much information to share that we didn't feel we could do justice to all of your questions this afternoon. So you can submit questions ahead of time via this survey. Follow the QR code. Please complete the survey, and there is an open form answer question. You can add your answers. We have been tracking everything that's in the chat today, and we will get those questions answered the 24th as well. The best way to ensure that you get your question answered is to submit it ahead of time. While most of the agencies and organizations, as 10, involved in the NRS updates will have a representative present on our July 24th session, Some of our members are double booked, and so they offered to provide answers in writing for us to share on the 24th, but they need a little time to pull that together. We will also have the chat open on July 24th for questions, and we will do our best to get to as many of those as possible. Next slide. Until the 24th, you can stay involved by signing up for the newsletter, checking out the NRS webpage, or following us on social media. Next slide. And finally, I just want to say thank you for joining us this afternoon. If you can tell by Dave's presentation, the past 2.5 years of working on Minnesota NRS updates have been both joyful and exhausting, and we are so excited to be able to share the results of this report with you. And we hope to see you again on July 24th. And until then, please enjoy reading all 329 pages of the NRS. Thank you.